power has a secret. It is rarely taken by shouting. Most of the time, it is built in silence, in the mind of someone who can stay 3 steps ahead of everyone else. But why do some people seem to move through chaos with an eerie calm, turning pressure into opportunity, while most of us feel drowned by it? Have you ever been in a tense negotiation and had the clear feeling that someone in that room was not playing the same game as everyone else? Someone who seemed to see angles and possibilities invisible to the rest of us. That feeling is real. It comes from a fundamental difference in how we process the world, especially at moments of critical decision. For most people, pressure triggers a chain reaction. The heart races, vision narrows, the fight or flight instinct takes over, and strategic thinking is pushed into the background. We make choices to relieve the discomfort of the present, to put out the immediate fire, without calculating the future cost. Does that pattern sound familiar? It is the default design of our brain. Persuasion engineering and strategic influence begin exactly when you learn to hack that system. It is about building a mindset that not only resists pressure, but uses it as fuel. We see the strongest personification of this ideal in fictional archetypes like Frank Underwood in House of Cards. Characters like him are a fascinating case study, a perfect laboratory to understand the psychology of power in its purest form. The most important lesson is not in his external schemes, but in his internal operating system, the foundation on which everything else is built. That foundation rests on 2 pillars that together form an almost unshakable mental fortress. The first pillar is what we can call the architect's vision, or the long game. While people around him are focused on laying the next brick, the master strategist has already visualized the entire cathedral. Every move, every word, every apparent concession is not an isolated event, but part of a much larger design. Understanding this is crucial. This long-term perspective allows for a patience that seems almost inhuman. It allows someone to absorb a temporary defeat calmly, because on the larger mental map that loss may be the exact sacrifice needed for a crushing victory later. It is the difference between reacting to time and commanding it. The second pillar, which makes the long game possible, is strict emotional detachment. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive secret. It is not about being a robot without feelings. It is an extreme form of emotional intelligence. It is the ability to feel the wave of anger, fear, or euphoria rising, to notice it, and still refuse to be carried away by it. Think of a surgeon. They need empathy to understand the patient. But when it is time to make the incision, the hand must be guided by technique and logic, not by fear of making a mistake. The high-level strategist does the same with decisions. They place emotion into an analysis box, decide with cold logic, and only then, if it is useful, use emotion as a tool to persuade, intimidate, or inspire. Emotion stops being the pilot and becomes just another instrument on the control panel. This combination of a clear vision of the future and the calm of someone who is not a hostage to their own emotions creates the base of all power. But having the map is not the same as conquering the territory. How does this mentality turn into concrete acts of persuasion? How is that inner coolness used to shape external reality and influence the decisions of others? The answer is to transform this mental clarity into a real architecture of perception. Before we dive into the practical tools these master strategists use to build their narratives, I want to pause for a moment and connect with you. This conversation about our inner world, about the battle between logic and emotion, is deep. I want to know how it resonates with you. Does the idea of emotional detachment inspire you or scare you? Have you felt, in your career or in your personal life, the high price of a critical decision made in the heat of the moment? If this kind of reflection makes sense to you, share in the comments what touched you most or intrigued you so far. Reading everyone's perspective is what truly enriches this community and turns a monologue into a dialogue. If you believe conversations like this are important, if you feel you are learning something valuable, leaving your like is the simplest and most powerful way to say that. Your like is not just a number. It is a signal that helps this message reach more people who also want to understand the psychology of influence in depth. And of course, if you want to continue this journey with me, unpacking the layers of persuasion and power, subscribe to the channel. Your participation really is the fuel that lets me keep investing time and energy into analyses like this, with more and more depth. I am truly grateful that you are here and part of this. Now that this mental base is established, let us go back to the battlefield. Time for tools. The first, and perhaps the most powerful, is not a weapon but a brush. It is the subtle art of painting reality before others even have the chance to see it with their own eyes. This technique has a name in psychology: framing. It is one of the most powerful tools of persuasion because it is invisible to most people. Think of it this way: the strategist does not change the facts. They choose the frame around the picture, and the frame changes everything. It dictates focus, tone, and emotion. A restructuring fee sounds much more acceptable than a budget cut, even though the result is the same. Process optimization sounds like progress, while mass layoff produces panic. The facts are identical, but the frame completely changes their impact, and as a result, the decisions people make. The hidden truth is that our brain is programmed to save energy, and the frame we are given becomes the easiest shortcut for interpretation. Understanding this can be a turning point in your mindset. Archetypal figures like the ones we see in House of Cards are absolute masters of this art. They never enter a debate they have not framed in advance. They do not play defense, answering accusations. They build the arena where the discussion will happen. They define the terms, the enemy, and the desired solution before the opponent even realizes the game has started. Behind the scenes of power, we see that controlling the narrative is more important than having the best arguments. The impact is huge. When you control the frame, you guide people to the conclusion you want, and the most impressive part is that they arrive there believing the decision was entirely theirs. It is persuasion in its most elegant and lethal form. Comment below, architect of reality. But what happens when controlling only the perception of a problem is not enough? What if you need something more personal, an obligation, a psychological debt that the other person feels almost forced to pay? Here we enter one of the most fascinating and dangerous territories of human psychology: the engineering of moral debt. We all have mental software installed at birth, called reciprocity. It is the deep instinct to give back when someone does us a favor. It is the base of social cooperation, an unwritten contract that lets us trust one another. If a friend helps you move, you naturally feel inclined to help them next time. It is a virtuous cycle, a two-way street. In the hands of a master of strategic influence, that two-way street becomes a one-way trap. The hidden truth is that this instinct can be exploited and turned into a weapon. The strategist does not wait for you to ask for help. They offer a favor you did not request, a kindness you did not expect, creating a debt you never asked for. The impact of an unsolicited favor is enormous because it bypasses your freedom of choice. You are placed in the position of a debtor without your consent. The dark genius of the tactic lies in the imbalance. The initial favor can be tiny, almost insignificant. Privileged information, an opened door, a strategic compliment in public. Yet the psychological debt it generates is vague, abstract, and therefore huge. In the backstage of your mind, that debt grows, fed by your own sense of honor. The strategist knows the most valuable currency is not money, it is, "you owe me." They patiently collect these invisible coins, knowing that at the right moment they can cash one in and demand something far greater in return. This investor mindset turns every interaction into a potential lever for the future, shaping the other person's decisions before they even know they will have to decide. Comment: psychological debt. Once that debt is finally collected and the person yields, taking a first step, no matter how small, something even more powerful happens in their mind. A subtle mechanism pushes them to keep going in the same direction. That mechanism is one of the pillars of social psychology and is called commitment and consistency. The hidden truth behind its power is that we humans have an almost obsessive need to be and appear consistent with our past decisions. Once we take a step, our mind works actively to justify that action and convince us it was the right choice. It is a matter of personal integrity and ego. To go back is to admit a mistake, and our brain hates that feeling. The master of strategic influence understands this internal programming better than anyone and uses it with surgical precision. They will never ask for your full loyalty at once. They do not ask for the castle. They ask for one key. It is that small first yes that they want. A minor favor, a positive opinion in a conversation, a vote for a cause that seems noble. That first yes is a psychological anchor. Once you agree to the small request, the next one, slightly bigger, feels like the logical and coherent continuation of your previous decision. Refusing it would create discomfort and dissonance. And so your journey begins down a path that looks like it is your own choice, but whose stones were carefully laid by someone else. The impact of this technique is devastating because it creates an inner transformation in the target. To justify their actions, the person begins to change their own mindset and perceptions to match the commitments they have made. They start to believe in the cause. It is a snowball effect. One small step leads to another, and when they finally notice, they are already too far from their original position, standing at a point of no return. Comment below, the first step. This engineering of commitment only works if the strategist knows exactly which button to press to get that first crucial yes. Those buttons are almost always tied to our most primitive emotions. At this point, influence stops being a logical exercise and becomes an emotional hunt. An elite strategist knows that to move someone, you do not need to convince them with facts. You need to align with what already moves them from the inside. The hidden truth is that each person is a unique emotional map, a private battlefield with its own treasures and abysses. The treasures are their deepest desires: ambition, recognition, security, power. The abysses are their visceral fears: failure, irrelevance, exposure. While amateurs try to sell their own map, the master observer studies the other person's map in silence. They read souls, searching for the crack in the armor, the unspoken ambition, the whispered fear behind every conversation. This insight changes how we see every human interaction. The mindset we see in archetypes like Frank Underwood is not that of a blunt attacker, but of a navigator. He does not create the desire for power in an ambitious journalist. He identifies it and presents himself as the only vehicle that can take her there. He does not invent a veteran politician's fear of becoming obsolete. He mirrors it and offers the only escape route. The impact is total. The target does not feel manipulated, they feel understood. The strategist's proposal does not sound like an order. It sounds like the perfect solution to their private anxiety or deepest longing. This is the journey from common persuader to true decision engineer. Stop pushing and start aligning. The strategist does not attack the person. They simply use the topography of that person's emotional map to their advantage. Comment below, emotional map. But having the map and knowing the secret routes in someone else's mind is only half the battle. The other half is how you show up on that field. It is how your image and your gestures communicate power before you speak a single word. This is the architecture of status, the silent performance that happens before the first word is spoken. Power is not only what you do, it is what others believe you are capable of doing. That perception is built largely on the non-verbal battlefield. The hidden truth is that even though we value logic and reason, our decisions about trust and submission are deeply influenced by primitive instincts. Those instincts read body language. Posture, gestures, tone of voice, and use of space are the billboard that announces your authority or your insecurity. A strategist knows that their body is their first and most important tool of influence. Look at the power archetype in House of Cards. His authority is a calculated choreography. While others fidget under pressure, he remains still, an island of calm in a sea of chaos. His gestures are economical and deliberate, each movement heavy with meaning. The sound of his ring hitting the table is not a nervous tick. It is a statement of dominance, an audible full stop. The perfect suit is not vanity. It is armor, a uniform that communicates seriousness and control. Even the way he sits in a chair, especially in the Oval Office, is not about comfort. It is about occupation. He does not simply sit. He takes ownership of the space. This mindset, this transformation of objects and gestures into symbols of power, has a crushing impact. It forces everyone around him into his frame of reference, to react to his calm, to bow, even unconsciously, to his projected authority. Comment below. Silent power. Of all his displays of power and control, there is one that this archetype reserves for only one person. A technique he does not use with any other character in the room, and perhaps his greatest lesson in Persuasion. A secret connection that he establishes directly with the viewer. This connection is called breaking the fourth wall. In narrative terms, it happens when a character recognizes they are in a fictional story and speaks to the audience. In persuasion engineering, what we see in an archetype like Frank Underwood is something far more sophisticated. It is not a cheap trick. It is the most brilliant influence tactic of all, aimed directly at us. When he looks into the camera, he is not just talking to the viewer, he is recruiting us. He turns us from simple observers into his only true confidants. It is a whisper straight into our psyche, an invitation to the backstage of power that is almost impossible to refuse. The hidden truth is that by revealing his secrets, he creates an instant and powerful alliance. Think about the psychology of this. He lies to, manipulates, and betrays every character in the story except one: you. With us, he is brutally honest. He offers us his darkest revelations and his ruthless philosophy. This act of sharing secrets is one of the greatest accelerators of trust that exists. He elevates us, putting us on his level, treating us as intellectual partners capable of understanding the complexity of his plans. Suddenly, we are no longer watching a series. We are participating in a conspiracy. We are accomplices. This mental shift is crucial. We begin to see the other characters through his eyes, as pawns on his chessboard, because he told us they are. He not only frames reality inside the story, he frames our perception of the entire story. It is the final act of control. Comment below. I am the accomplice. By creating this secret alliance, this exclusive we between him and you, he is actually using one of the oldest tactics of unity and power in its purest form, the creation of a common enemy. That enemy can be almost anything: an imminent crisis, a political rival, a disastrous public policy, or even an abstract threat to safety or values. What matters is not the nature of the enemy, but its unifying effect. The hidden truth of group psychology is that nothing forges a we faster and more strongly than the existence of a they. This tactic is a shortcut to loyalty. It simplifies a complex and nuanced world into a binary battle of good versus evil, and positions the strategist as the general on the right side. Faced with a shared threat, small differences and internal rivalries within the group become irrelevant. Survival becomes the top priority, and people instinctively look for the protection of a strong leader. This is one of the darkest but most realistic revelations from behind the scenes of power. A true master of influence does not wait for crises to appear. He designs them. In archetypes like Underwood, we see this mentality in constant action. He knows how to leak information to generate panic, how to frame an opponent so they look like an existential threat, or how to amplify a small problem until it looks like a national disaster. At the exact moment when fear and confusion reach their peak, he arrives with the solution, the plan, the safe harbor. The impact of this move is a masterpiece of social engineering. He becomes the shepherd of the sheep he himself scared. The anger and anxiety of the public are not aimed at him, but at the enemy he pointed to. It is the final transformation, from potential target to indispensable protector. Comment below. US against them. We have analyzed the mind, the tools, and the strategies of a master manipulator. We have seen the backstage of power. One question remains: how can we, in our own lives, use these same principles not to manipulate, but to lead, protect, and make better decisions under pressure in an ethical way? Part 9. This is the central question and the turning point in our journey. The answer lies in a hidden but liberating truth. No tool is inherently good or evil. A knife in a chef's hand creates art. In an attacker's hand, it creates pain. The same is true for the principles of influence psychology. Transforming your mindset is not about becoming the archetype we dissected. It is about extracting the essence of those strategies and applying them with positive intent. The first ethical lesson is clarity of the long game. For you, this does not mean plotting the downfall of your rivals. It means having a crystal clear vision of where you want to go in your career and in your life. It means making daily decisions, even small ones, that build that future instead of just reacting to what feels urgent right now. It is about being the architect of your own journey. The second lesson is the power of silence and observation. Instead of mapping weaknesses to exploit, you map needs to serve. You practice empathetic listening to genuinely understand the pains and desires of your colleagues, clients, or partners, creating solutions that bring real value and build long-term trust. Now for the third lesson, which is the foundation for all the others: mastery of calm under pressure. Emotional detachment, when used ethically, becomes emotional intelligence. It is not about being cold. It is about not letting panic, anger, or anxiety hijack your ability to decide rationally. It is the power of the pause. It is taking a deep breath when everyone else is in panic, analyzing the situation clearly, and responding strategically instead of reacting by instinct. The impact of mastering this one skill is immense and completely changes the game in your favor in any negotiation, crisis, or challenge. When combined, these three keys do not create a manipulator. They create a leader. Someone who has vision, understands people, and remains steady in the middle of the storm. The final revelation is that the greatest power these tactics offer is not control over others, but mastery over yourself. Comment below. Ethical use. Choosing this ethical path is not only a moral choice, it is the only sustainable strategy. Power built purely on fear and manipulation, like the archetype we analyzed, carries inside itself the seed of its own destruction. That seed is the very nature of manipulation. Power built on deception and fear is like a house of cards, impressive from a distance, fundamentally unstable up close. It demands an enormous amount of energy to maintain. Every lie is a new fragile flaw that must be supported. Every person who has been deceived becomes a point of vulnerability, a loose thread that, if pulled, can unravel the entire plot. The hidden truth in this journey of revelations is that trust is an asset that multiplies, while fear is a liability that accumulates interest. Genuine influence, based on value and integrity, creates allies who hold up your structure. Manipulation creates debtors who, at the first opportunity, will try to reclaim what was taken from them, with collapse as the final payment. The highest price is not only the risk of falling, it is the cost to the one at the top. Living in a state of constant vigilance, doubting everyone, unable to form an authentic connection, is the prison the manipulator builds for themselves. Behind the scenes of their own mind, they become the most isolated person in the room. The impact of this lonely journey is the slow erosion of their own humanity. The final irony, the great revelation of archetypes like Underwood, is that in the obsessive search to control everything and everyone, they lose control of the only thing that truly matters, the possibility of a lasting legacy. What they build is an empire of sand, destined to be washed away by the tide of truth. The real transformation, the longest game of all, is to understand that sustainable strength does not come from how well you can fool others, but from how firmly you anchor yourself in your own principles. Comment below. Sustainable influence. In the end, the choice this analysis presents is clear. You can spend your life building an impressive house of cards, destined to collapse with the first gust of truth. Or you can build a fortress of trust, brick by brick, that resists time and creates real impact. If you made it this far, all the way to this final point, you are not a casual viewer. You are part of the group that wants to go deeper and does not accept the superficial. I am genuinely grateful for your attention and for your time on this journey. So I know that you completed this analysis with me and that you are one of us. Comment the phrase, Fortress Builder. That is how I know who is really diving deep into this content. If this conversation brought you a new perspective or a valuable insight, leaving your like is the most sincere way to register that connection. And if you feel this is the kind of analysis that challenges you and helps you grow, and you want to keep exploring the psychology behind strategic influence, consider subscribing to the channel. we still have a lot to uncover together. By the way, speaking of building with strategy, there is a video right here where we analyze another kind of power, leaving the political game and stepping into high-impact negotiation rooms. Click there and our conversation continues. See you there.